Kalispera. Your Excellency, colleagues and friends, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honour and pleasure to welcome you to the annual open meeting of the British School at Athens. I begin by expressing the school's gratitude to the Secretary-General of the Archaeological, Dr. Vasilios Petrakos, for this wonderful room, and to his staff, and to the many friends and colleagues who make our work possible. We particularly thank the staff of the Ministry of Culture and Sports. We are most grateful to Dr. Maria Andriadaki Blazaki, Secretary-General of the Ministry of Culture and Sports, and Dr. Eleni Korka, the Director-General of Antiquities, as well as to the numerous colleagues in the Ministry who make our archaeological work possible. In particular, we thank those in charge of the regions in which our major fieldwork took place. Dr. Dimitris Athanasoulis, effort of the Antiquities of the Cyclades, Dr. Stella Chrysoulaki, effort of Antiquities of Western Attica, Piraeus and the Islands, Dr. Paraskevi Kalamara, effort of Antiquities of Evia, Mr. Ioannis Kanonidis, effort of Antiquities of Chalkidiki and Mount Athos, Dr. Konstantinos Kissas, effort of Antiquities of Corinthia, Mrs. Evangelia Pandu, effort of Antiquities of Laconia, Dr. Alkistis Papadimitriou, effort of Antiquities of the Argolid, Mrs. Maria Fortini Papakonstantinou and Dr. Efthymia Karantsali, effort of Antiquities of Theotida and Evretenia, Mrs. Christa Sofianou, effort of Antiquities of Lasithi, and Mrs. Vasiliki Sithiakaki, effort of Antiquities of Heraklion. And I add my thanks as Director to all the BSA staff, both in Greece and the UK, for everything they've contributed to the programme of work that I summarise here this evening. The school's research programme in 2016 was once again extensive, and I can only present a selection here. Our activities span many times, places and disciplines: history, ancient, medieval and modern, art history, anthropology, literature, philosophy and the fine arts. These activities range from lectures and exhibitions in the school on a range of topics, such as the poetry of Ritsos and Vretakos, cooking wares in the Mediterranean, or early Rebetica. Further workshops and lectures in collaboration with other institutions, such as the University of Athens, the National Hellenic Research Centre, the Benaki Museum and the Museum of Cycladic Art, and of course research into the modern world, the life of John Pendlebury, carried on in our archive, and the refugee crisis in the research of our Levendis Fellow, Dr. Irene Avramopoulou. The real value of research, of course, comes with its dissemination to the wider public, both academic and general. Our journals and our monograph series present to that wider public the significant contribution the school makes to the distribution of the knowledge generated by the research we both carry out and facilitate. In addition to new issues of the Annual of the British School at Athens and archaeological reports, and ongoing updates to archaeology in Greece online in collaboration with the French School at Athens, 2 further volumes appeared during 2016 in our monograph series, British School at Athens, Modern Greek and Byzantine Studies, now published under Routledge's imprint. While, right at the end of the year, the first volume in the series British School at Athens Studies in Greek Antiquity was published by Cambridge University Press, co-edited by the Fitch Laboratory Director, Vangelio Kyriadzi, and Carl Knappett. Further volumes are in the pipeline, about which more next year. Once again, a major thread running through BSA fieldwork was the study of communal living, from the tiny early Bronze Age community on the islet of Dhaskalio, through the classical city of Olynthos, to the long-lived urban centre of Knossos, where I begin my review. Crete, of course, has been a focal point of the BSA's archaeological research for well over a century. Another significant century was reached 2 weeks ago, when Sinclair Hood, a legendary figure in the BSA's work on Crete, reached the grand old age of 100. He is pictured here on the right in a photograph from Rafina in 1956, while he was director of the school, with, on the far left, the late Richard Hope Simpson, and on the far right, Richard Tomlinson, and standing, Jane Rabnett, Secretary of the School for 25 years, from 1950 to 1975. As noted last year, Dr. Caroline Thurston took up the post of Knossos Curator in January 2016. Her appointment was followed by that of the new Curation Assistant, Hannah Gwyther, and subsequently the part-time Curation Assistant, Dr. Chris Hale, as well as the new handyman, Zacharias Pekinakis. Caroline left her post in October to take up a new job in Oxford and handed over the curatorship to Kostis Christakis, an experienced archaeologist of Crete, already familiar to many of you and to those working at the Knossos Research Centre. And I'm pleased to note that Dr. Christakis is present here this evening. Of our projects on Crete, the Palace and Landscape at Palekastro project had its first study season in 2016, and there will be more to report in future. Fitch Laboratory staff continue to explore the history of ceramic production at that site, combining petrographic and chemical analysis with geological prospection and sampling. Their emphasis in 2016 was on the transition from the Proto to the Neopalatial periods. Meanwhile, study of data collected by the Knossos Urban Landscape Project continues to develop the narrative of Knossos' urban development over 8 millennia. Completion of study of prehistoric material provided an occasion for an entire session on long-term urban dynamics at Knossos at the Archaeological Institute of America meetings in San Francisco last January, and more recently at the 12th Cretological Congress in Iraklio last September. In the meantime, a second season of geophysical survey was completed in 2016, focused on understanding the urban layout and extant remains of Roman Knossos. The 2016 season, indicated in blue here, achieved 5 main aims: continued use of magnetometry over the broader survey area, systematic GPS mapping of known standing remains, refinement of the orthogonal plan in the north sector of the city, further exploration of the Acropolis hill slopes, and more investigation of areas surrounding known tombs. Data collection involved laying out a 30 by 30 metres grid, of which 110 grids were covered, an area of around 6 hectares, a smaller total area than the first season, but focused on larger contiguous blocks. Despite the challenges of operating in an environment dominated by Kouskouras bedrock and architectural blocks and mortars made of the same material, preliminary observations are already modifying somewhat interpretations developed last year. It now appears likely that the Roman period city had at least 3 different orientations, each determined by a combination of topography, landscape use history, and orthogonal intervention. The slopes of the Acropolis Hill, Monasteriako Kefali, shown here in yellow, type A, display significant evidence of ancient terracing, which creates a local topographic layout for this portion of the city. Results suggest the slope is busy with structures and that the high density of surface material cannot all be washed from the hill above. This area is an excellent candidate for more intensive investigation with resistivity and ground-penetrating radar in future. Type B, shown in blue, the area north of the Villa Ariadne, including the Villa Dionysos, exhibits a more typically orthogonal arrangement that is orientated broadly north to south and associated with planned settlements. Given that these are some of the broader, flatter parts of the valley, this is perhaps unsurprising, but this is also the area with the most substantial standing remains, including some significant excavations, such as the civil basilica and the Villa Dionysos itself. It seems clear that there is substantial regularity in this part of the city, with evidence of streets, street intersections, and buildings with individual rooms or courtyards in some cases. Within this regularity, a curious anomaly is the alignment of the civic basilica, which is displaced slightly to the northwest in relation to the orientation of other structures. The area to the south of the Villa Ariadne and to the east and north, type C, shown in purple or mauve here, has a similar orientation to type A, but along a more northeasterly southwesterly line. This region also contains a broad range of standing Roman concrete remains, some related to water management, aqueduct segments or fountains. The alignment generally conforms to the topography of the valley and the underlying earlier terracing, some of which may well be Minoan in origin, raising interesting interpretative questions about knowledge of the site's earlier past in the Roman period. Investigations focused specifically on the Makritikos wall revealed two long magnetic anomalies parallel to the existing wall. This seems to confirm the hypothesis of Hood and Smythe that the structure was part of a very large stoa. Overall, the 2016 results demonstrated that significant areas of housing, buildings and streets can now be reconstructed, in part, through geophysical survey. Accurate recording of existing standing remains is a priority, given the potential for loss, as is evident in the number of Roman remains visible in the 1980s, but no longer. A combination of geophysics and high-resolution GPS survey has the potential to generate significant advances in our knowledge of the local and ancient topography. Finally, at Knossos, a first study season of the collaborative project, Synergasia, involving a Knossian neighbourhood on Gypsades Hill, south of the palace, took place in 2016, generating results that demonstrate the value of the integration of multiple bioarchaeological and microstratigraphical techniques to uncover fine-grained data on consumption, the nature and role of agricultural production, and broader issues surrounding Knossos' urban elite. And many of you will recall last year's lecture on this occasion by Professor Amy Bogard on this very topic. Study of stratigraphy and pottery confirmed and refined the complex history of Building 1, excavated first in 2014 and 2015. The earliest evidence of occupation belongs to a poorly preserved Middle Minoan II structure, with scant indications of use in the succeeding MM3A period. During late Minoan 1A, the area north of Building 1, indicated here, was cleared of earlier debris and a wall founded, which was associated with a deposit of highly fragmented late Minoan 1A material, including broken fine tableware dating to the Thera eruption horizon. In late Minoan 1B, the north facade of Building 1 was constructed or reconstructed, and its interior cleared throughout to bedrock and subsequently backfilled with packing material containing highly fragmented pottery, with LM1B sherds providing a terminus postquem. There is evidence for its use in late Minoan II and for resumed construction work in late Minoan III, possibly after a hiatus of occupation. Geoarchaeological study focused on priority units identified during excavation and study. Magnetic susceptibility, particle size, and loss and ignition data were gathered to clarify variation among units in the burnt area of Building 1 and in the midden deposits that lie immediately outside. These techniques offer a means of identifying different forms of building material in the burned area of Space 106, as opposed to the cyclical repeated depositions in middens outside the building. Bioarchaeological study focused on archaeobotany, charcoal, plant microbotanical residues, both on ceramics and ground stone, on lipid residues in ceramics, and on the fauna. The archaeobotanical, charcoal and faunal analyses demonstrate the very different character and interpretive potential of external midden deposits, in contrast to the burned area of Building 1, for reconstructing resource and land use. The middens preserve rapid accumulations of discard, including processing byproducts and spent fuel. They yielded relatively high densities of charcoal and faunal remains, including large pieces of wood, and articulated animal bones, plus low-level discard of nutshell, olive stones, and crop material. The middens therefore offer the potential to track patterns of consumption within different parts of the neighbourhood and through time. The burnt area of Building 1, by contrast, yielded much lower densities of wood and bone, but high concentrations of pulse crops, with a very low background noise, the spatial distribution of which suggests separate storage of 5 different species: lentil, bitter vetch, grass pea, Celtic bean, and Spanish vetchling. Moving north to the Peloponnese, the final season of the Kenchreai Quarries project addressed research questions from the 2013 survey through 4 fieldwork components. Pick-up survey of sherd concentration near the northern edge of the 2013 field area, excavation to investigate site formation processes relating to the deposition of chipstone lithics, geophysical investigation using magnetometry and ground-penetrating radar, and drone photography of the 2013 study area to create a digital elevation model as the basis for the project's GIS study. The pickup survey located a discrete scatter of material about 55 by 50 metres, approximately aligned northeast-southwest. Preliminary reading of the ceramics collected reveals significant early to Middle Roman activity, continuing, perhaps to a diminished extent, into Late Roman, but with no post-Roman evidence. Uniquely within the study area, significant quantities of chipped stone, including debitage, are dominated by obsidian. The obsidian blades and bladelets include examples of probable early Helladic and potentially Neolithic date, and roughly coincide with the distribution of early Helladic pottery. After the prehistoric period, activity resumed during the classical period. 3 excavation trenches were opened in an area where concentration of flint lithics had been found in 2013. The recovery of significant surface artefacts attests to processes of erosion accelerated by fire damage to soil and vegetation in 2012. The principal functions of Trench 1 were to clarify both the character and chronology of lithic manufacture in this area and to establish any functional or chronological association with historic oolite exploitation along the Kenchreai quarry line. The trench produced no in situ anthropogenic deposits, just unstratified soils to a maximum depth of 43 centimetres. Hellenistic to Middle Roman transport amphorae, cups and cooking wares dominate the surface and thin underlying fire-damaged soil layers, while below this Roman material is absent, but prehistoric, including late Helladic pottery, more abundant, and lithics more numerous than pottery. The entire deposit appears to reflect erosion downslope, probably over a short distance. Upslope, trenches 2 and 3 provided controls for Trench 1. In both, the pottery is of similar date and type to that above the base of the fire-damaged soil layer of Trench 1, but prehistoric pottery is uncommon. These results will assist in the interpretation of the 2013 surface finds from large areas of Quarry Complex A. In 2016, magnetometry and ground-penetrating radar survey were targeted in areas where study of the 2013 finds indicated concentrations of interest, successfully identifying subsurface features. Given the relatively low-lying study area, the magnetic signal was unexpectedly obscured in several places by the effects of lightning, marked by dark, radiating linear features, which you see most clearly in the uppermost area here. In Area 5, a shallow linear feature may be a ditch, while at its west end, a probable buried quarry face was identified parallel to faces visible immediately to the south. Additional data processing is required to determine whether these represent the remains of built structures or quarry faces. In 2016, the project also completed processing of artefacts recovered in the 2013 survey. Broad trends across significant parts of the study area were identified. A few prehistoric, early and Bronze Age, late Bronze Age sherds were recovered. Activity resumed in the Archaic to Classical on a larger scale from Hellenistic and continued in most areas until the 7th century AD. Ruined structures in central quarry complex A, dating to the Ottoman period, 15th to 18th century, contained reused fine-slipped classical to Hellenistic tiles, probably from a monumental structure. Study of the glass finds from 2013 indicates that most diagnostic pieces of window and vessel glass are early Byzantine, while Roman glass, mostly goblet fragments, is present in smaller quantities, and no pre-Roman glass has yet been identified. We now move out into the Aegean, where the second season of a projected 4-year programme commenced excavation on the islet of Dhaskalio, opposite Kavos and Keros. The Cambridge Keros project had confirmed in 2006-8 that Dhaskalio was a major settlement in the later part of the early Bronze Age, its inception contemporary with the special deposits north and south at Kavos, with their abundant finds of broken marble, sculptures and vessels. 7 trenches were opened in 2016 in Dhaskalio and 11 in the northwest part of Keros, in the area designated Polygon 2 by the earlier Keros Island survey. Investigations on Keros established clearly the early Bronze Age date of the field walls and other structures previously observed on the surface. Ceramic study indicated that the pottery could consistently be attributed to phase A of the Dhaskalio ceramic sequence and the period of both special deposits at Kavos, that is, to the Keros-Syros culture rather than to the later Castri phase of the Cycladic early Bronze Age. Philacope 1 and grey minion sherds were identified in only 2 tests, indicating limited continuation into Dhaskalio Phase C. Further investigations here should enhance our understanding of the relationship between the sanctuary and settlement at Dhaskalio and its hinterland on Keros. On Dhaskalio, the structures investigated in 2016 were assigned mainly to Phase B of the site sequence. This was clear in the large open area excavation in Trench A, where several rooms and surfaces, as well as terrace walls of that phase, were revealed. A notable find was a small seal stone, the first to be found on Dhaskalio. None has been found on Kavos. The structures of Trench F, immediately south of Trench 7 of the 2007-8 excavations, were securely dated by the accompanying pottery to Phase C. An interesting find here was a petroglyph, apparently the first to be discovered in a secure early Bronze Age context, Cycladic context. The widespread occurrence of pot sherds with traces of copper was supplemented by more plentiful indications in Trench L, on the eastern slope of the island, where a stone dagger mould, metallurgical ceramics, and numerous copper fragments, as well as a floor surface with a burnt area revealing very high traces of metals identified through XRF analysis, suggested casting in that location. Numerous fragments of lead, as well as a small lead axe, shown here, suggest the casting of lead artefacts also. Metalworking has been identified as a frequent component of routine occupation spaces throughout Dhaskalio, but this year's find may indicate a workshop. Portable XRF study of Dhaskalio revealed high readings of copper throughout and high readings of lead in the northern part of the island, in contrast to much lower readings in Kavos, except on the Kavos promontory itself, a known metalworking location. At the east end of the island, only 5 metres above the sea, Trench H revealed a stairway with drain, which was clearly an entrance to Dhaskalio, perhaps the main entrance from the causeway which in the early Bronze Age connected it with Kavos. This stairway may find a counterpart at a higher level, at the southern end of a major terrace wall excavated in 2008. Cleaning operations at the north end of the site have revealed more clearly the complexity of wall structures in that area. Ceramic studies are beginning to offer the impression that while the summit was fully utilised in Phase C, much of the extensive building remains visible elsewhere on the site date to Phase B. Beyond the summit, it may be that not many areas were occupied in Phase C at all. The extent of habitation in Phase A remains to be confirmed. The methodology adopted for the excavations of Dhaskalio and Keros included open-area, single-context excavation and digital recording. Excavation data in 2016 were born digital, with all data captured in the field and in the excavation laboratory using iPads running the iDig system developed by Bruce Hartzler for the American School excavations in the Athenian Agora. Stratigraphic recording and control was achieved in 3 dimensions through the use of photogrammetry, rather than traditional 2-dimensional plans and sections, which were then generated from the photogrammetric record. Prompt recording and study of finds and synchronization of those data, especially for pottery, to field iPads ensured contexts were dated and basic information available promptly. Data were synchronized daily across all iPads and uploaded to external backup and to the excavation database. Pausing briefly on the island of Euboea to note that study continued at Lefkandi, about which we will hear more very shortly in the following lecture, we return to the mainland. And here the collaborative project, the Synergasia, at the Middle Neolithic site of Koutroulou-Magoula in Thessaly, also had a study season in 2016, including further work on the site's rich repertoire of figurines. I end this review of fieldwork in the Chalkiriki, at the site of Olynthos, where there was a 3rd season in 2016 of another collaborative project, Synergasia, that seeks to build a holistic picture of Greek households within their urban and regional settings through a combination of modern scientific excavation and geophysical and field survey of the city and surrounding area. In 2016, fieldwork had 4 objectives: to excavate further House B96 on the North Hill, to investigate the transition between the built-up area of the city and the countryside through field survey, to extend investigation onto the South Hill, probably the core of the original settlement and the least well-understood part of the city, and to create a new plan of the site based on 3-dimensional optical mapping so as to integrate more effectively data from Robinson's excavations from the 1920s and 30s with the results of the current project's geophysical survey, surface collection and excavation. The South Hill was the focus of an April season during which geophysical survey and surface collection were both carried out on the same 30-metre grid. Surface collection was completed in July when supplementary geophysical survey was undertaken and 3 small trial trenches were also excavated. Geophysical survey focused on the southern area of the hill, less extensively explored by Robinson. Tentative initial interpretation of the geophysics results suggests that this part of the hill was laid out in a somewhat regular fashion, as a kind of grid, with parallel sets of curving east-west streets terminating at Robinson's 2 north-south avenues. Surface collection provided a wider chronological range of material than recovered so far from any other area of the site. Alongside typical pottery of the earlier 4th century BC, significant amounts of earlier material were recovered across the hill, both local and imported, including part of a copper alloy fibula of early Iron Age type. 3 small test trenches located to investigate anomalies detected by the geophysical survey revealed that the upper deposits on the South Hill are deeper and more mixed than those on the North Hill. Evidence of 4th century BC occupation was accompanied by residual finds of 6th century and possibly earlier date. These results will shape larger scale excavation on the South Hill planned for 2017. The main aim of the excavation on the North Hill was to extend our knowledge of the organisation of space in the final phase of occupation of House B96. Excavation on the western and eastern boundaries of the house showed that the block within which it sits was terraced into the hillside, the boundary walls between properties perhaps serving in places as terrace walls. In the northeast corner of the adjacent house B94, in the top left, the corner of an andron was located with a well-preserved mortar platform and non-representational black and white pebble mosaic. Part of the street facade at the south of house B96 was faced with a row of narrow ashlar blocks. A major feature of the organisation of internal space was a courtyard surfaced with large cobbles with a linear edge, perhaps marking the transition to an area with a shed roof. A further roof space was located in the northwest corner of the house to the north of the pastas and west of the Ecos complex excavated in 2015. South of the west end of the pastas, a further internal space yielded a number of ceramic vessels apparently crushed in situ as the house was destroyed. 2 distinct strata here suggest the possibility that the upper story extended over this area in addition to that north of the pastas. As in previous seasons, no evidence was found of any burnt destruction, suggesting that the house simply fell apart or was demolished. Field survey in 2016 covered an area of 0.71 square kilometres beyond the archaeological site. As previously, very little material not contemporary of the occupation of the North Hill was identified. West of the North Hill, high densities of material within the first 100 metres outside the fence suggest there was a settlement here, while further west, 3 or 4 very large tiles probably indicate graves. East of the South Hill, revisitation of an area located close to the so-called theatre, designated unsurveyable in 2014 due to poor visibility, revealed high concentrations of material after ploughing, including numerous pebbles from a mosaic. The Fitch Laboratory continued its extensive activities in 2016 under the broad themes of technological transfer, innovation and mobility. Each dot on this map represents the location of research in which the Fitch is involved. Last year was also the 5th anniversary of the installation of the Wavelength Dispersive X-ray Fluorescence Unit, WD-XRF, much easier, which has now firmly established chemical analysis alongside ceramic petrology in the Fitch's analytical repertoire. The technique is an integral part in a wide range of ongoing projects shown on this map, too many to summarise here, but including new work on Naxos and on Byzantine glazed ceramics from Kythera. 2 projects initiated in 2016 on the coastal western Peloponnese, both collaborations with the Institute for Oriental and European Archaeology of the Austrian Academy of Sciences, have extended the Fitch's research into the ceramic landscape of the central and western Peloponnese, a region largely unknown to date in terms of ceramic provenance and technology studies. The early Helladic II site of Romanos offered a narrowly dated assemblage from a well filled with remains of feasting activities, including 400 whole or almost complete pots. 100 samples selected for petrographic analysis revealed a significant degree of standardization in recipes, mixing and tempering, but not a standardized execution of such recipes, resulting in high compositional microvariation. This may reflect pottery produced by separate production units, all operating in the context of the same local tradition. Although Romanos shares stylistic similarities with other regional potting traditions, the majority of the pottery was locally produced. The first phase of an interdisciplinary study of the pottery from old and recent excavations at Kakouvatos, Samikon, Epitalion and Aios Dimitrios focused on the Kakouvatos assemblage, including pottery from a late Helladic IIb building on the Acropolis and from the adjacent late Helladic I to IIa Tholos tombs, utilising both petrographic and selectively applied neutron activation analysis. The Tholos tombs contained imported pottery, mainly transport containers, from different centres in central Crete, Kythera, the southeast Aegean, and other neighbouring regions in the western and eastern Peloponnese. The oval-mouth amphorae were imported mainly from centres in Crete, both south and north central, and the southeast Aegean, while most of the palace-style amphorae possibly originated in nearby centres of the western and eastern Peloponnese, less often from Kythera and only occasionally from Crete. Local products and imports seem to have coexisted on the Acropolis. It seems that in the early Mycenaean period, a high-ranking group in Kakouvatos had access to a broad exchange network involving different continental and maritime routes that require further exploration. The Fitch Laboratory and the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki were recently invited to collaborate with the effort of Antiquities of Eastern Attica in a 5-year Instat-funded project to publish the Mycenaean Cemetery at Kolikrepi, Sparta, dating to the late Helladic I to late Helladic IIIc, and comprising 65 tombs. Macroscopic typological study of the pottery currently underway will be followed by sampling and laboratory analysis to address questions of technology and provenance. Study of the human skeletal remain from the tombs is already underway at the Fitch by Niki Papakonstantinou, a PhD student at the Aristotle University. Detailed study of the Kolikrepi skeletal remains, represented primarily by fragmented, scattered, disarticulated and commingled human bones, is shedding new light on the treatment of the deceased and human interference in after-burial activities by employing an analytical taphonomic approach. 2 bursary holders worked at the Fitch in 2015-16. Evangelia Viora, another PhD student from the Aristotle University, studied regional production and circulation patterns of late Bronze Age handmade pottery in the wider region of Thessaloniki. Her primary objective was to explore fabric variation with and across sites through petrographic analysis and refiring tests with an emphasis on monochrome burnished pottery. Silvia Amiconi, a PhD student from University College London, investigated kitchenware production and consumption in late classical to early imperial Priene. Following a successful pilot study in 2014, Silvia studied cooking wares from the site and compared them with contemporary material from Asia Minor and other Eastern Mediterranean sites in the Fitch's reference collection, integrating petrographic and WD-XRF analysis. Overall, results point to a scenario where various regional and sub-regional cooking pot production centres supplied Priene in different periods, with a progressive standardisation of products in the late Hellenistic and Roman periods, as pottery production centres like Phocaea came to dominate the market in Asia Minor and beyond. Iro Camici, a master's student from Pisa, investigated for her thesis the conditions surrounding and the process of adoption of the potter's wheel on Kythera in relation to Crete, funded by an Erasmus Plus scholarship. The material studied was selected from 5 sequentially dated deposits from the late pre-palatial to the end of the Neopalatial period, recovered during BSA excavations at Castries in 1963 to 1965. Results indicate that the wheel coiling technique was first introduced to Kythera during the protopalatial period to produce small, fineware vessels. Its use grew over time and extended to larger and coarser wares following Cretan practice, but with a slight chronological delay. The thesis sheds light on the process of Minoanisation on Kythera and its role in Kythera's role in the transfer of Minoan traditions to the mainland. Last but not least, two undergraduate students from the Department of History and Archaeology at the Aristotle University, Yannis Hadjikonstantinou and Vicky Makridou, spent 2 months in summer 2016 at the Fitch under the Atlas scheme and provided valuable assistance in the reorganisation and digitisation of parts of the laboratory's sample collections. In closing, a word about changes in the school's management. Professor Malcolm Schofield ended his 7-year term as our chairman at the end of 2016. Malcolm has been an exemplary chairman, expending considerable energy on ensuring the school's success and making sure to engage with staff at all levels, both in Greece and the UK. He remains involved with the BSA in our development programme and our governance arrangements. Malcolm's long association with the archaeology of Greece we owe to his late wife, Elizabeth Schofield, who worked at Irene, where this photograph of Malcolm was taken, we believe, in 1975. Malcolm is succeeded by Dr. Carol Bell, formerly our honorary treasurer, who will be known to some of you through her work in later prehistoric trade, for which she was awarded a PhD at UCL in 2005. Unfortunately, Carol cannot be here this evening, but I'm pleased to note, as you will have met on the way in, that our new vice-chairman, Professor Robin Osborne, Professor of Ancient History at the University of Cambridge, is present. Carol's role as treasurer is taken over by a partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers, Mr. Hugh Smith. The themes of communal life and of materials, technologies and their mobility are not only relevant to the past, but also resonate in the present, reminding us of the BSA's statutory objective to promote the study of Greece in all its aspects, in all periods, including modern times. It is this commitment to a broad, cross-disciplinary view of Hellenic studies that sustains the relevance in the 21st century of an institution formed at the end of the 19th century. And with that, I conclude this year's report on the work of the British School. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce the main attraction this evening, our main lecturer, Irene Lemos, who will already be known to many in this audience. Irene is Professor of Classical Archaeology in the University of Oxford, where she is also a Fellow of Merton College. She graduated from the University of Athens and completed a DPhil at Oxford in 1988 on regional characteristics in the protogeometric period. She held an instat postdoctoral fellowship and various positions in Oxford, New York, and at the Cycladic Museum in Athens, before taking up a post in 1995 at the University of Edinburgh. She returned to Oxford in 2004 as reader, before her promotion to professor in 2007. Irene has published extensively on what we used to call the Dark Age of Greece, notably her monograph, The Protogeometric Aegean, published by Oxford University Press in 2003, and an enormously valuable co-edited volume with Sigrid Dege-Jalkotzi, product of a Levendis-funded conference held in Edinburgh, Ancient Greece from the Mycenaean Palaces to the Age of Homer, 2006. Irene was the ideal person to take over excavations at the site of Lefkandi, which had commenced in 1964 under the direction of the late Mervyn Popham and Hugh Sackett. She has been involved in the publication of the earlier excavations in the Lefkandi series and has now herself carried out 6 seasons there between 2003 and 2008 and is now nearing completion of study prior to their publication. Given that, now seemed an ideal moment to invite her to update us all on the site's history and significance. Her topic this evening, with a deliberate nod to a recent Nobel Prize recipient, is The Times They Are A-Changin', the contribution of Lefkandi Evia to our understanding of the making of early Greece.